I'm about to show you how to fix this instrument cluster for a Land Rover LR3 vehicle. The customer that sent it in stated they had intermittent issues with communication and power. Now, I've had it hooked into my bench system, and I haven't actually been able to recreate those issues. I'm not able to get it to power on at all. So let's bring it to our test vehicle and see if we can get some better luck there. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nick. I started Nick's Electronics Repair over a decade ago, and since then we have fixed over 28,000 devices. These two screws next. All right, so we'll turn off the vehicle. So this is our customer's cluster. Let's try turning on the vehicle and see what we get. Nothing at all. My park is coming up, but none of my other lights are coming up at all. At this point, neither the bench testing nor the live testing in the vehicle yielded any results, so we'll have to open it up and take a closer look at the circuit board. For the opening process, we have 3 clips on the front here. And if we flip it over to the other side, we have 4 more clips on the back, and the front panel comes off. Next, this piece should just lift off, no clips. And next we have our gauges. So those I'm just pinching out with my fingers. And finally we have this little button here. So there's a little clip that I'm pressing in with my tweezers. Next we can flip the unit over. And again, we have clips on the entire perimeter. So I'm just gonna use my tweezers to pry the clips. And it looks like this latch just re-engaged. Oh, there we go. And our circuit board is now free. So on the board itself, there are a few spots we want to check. The processor chip over here, and this green connector over here. For this next step, let's switch over to our microscope. First thing we want to do is take a look at the solder joints on the back side of that green connector that connects the cluster to the vehicle. And at first glance, I think I'm seeing some cracked joints. So let's zoom in just a little bit more. As I zoom in a little bit more, it's getting less clear whether or not these cracked joints are going to be the cause of our fault or not. And the reason I say that is because they don't look actually all that bad. So often we'll see little rings start to appear on the perimeter of the pins. And when that happens, it typically means that the pin is no longer able to send data through that cable. So right there, we're starting to see a little bit of the beginning of a crack. And the same goes with this one here, just a little bit. It's very minor, it's very hard to tell. Now, because this is a common issue, we are gonna be reflowing it anyways, even if that is not our immediate fault. I'm gonna start by adding some flux, and this is gonna help me reflow the joints a little bit smoother. And in addition to reflowing, I'm also gonna be adding just a little bit of extra solder as well. Oh, we have a little bridge. There we go. I'm going to clean up some of that flux with some isopropyl alcohol and a Q-tip. And then we'll get rid of any additional fibers that were left over from the Q-tip with the brush. All right, and that looks as good as new. So I'm not expecting this to have fixed the unit, but we are going to plug it in anyway and see what we get. All right, let's power it on. Oh. Well, that was interesting. That was better than before. And it's only staying on for a couple of seconds. I don't think it's improper contact. Let me try and put pressure on the chip on the back. If I put pressure on the chip on the back, the unit turns on. Okay, that more or less proves to me that, oh, our screen here is not turning on. This one is, but this one's not. But that more or less proves to me that the chip on the back is going to be our issue, because putting pressure on it did allow the cluster to at least partially turn on. So let's go ahead and start the work on that chip. Okay, so this is the chip in question, and as you can tell, it is coated with conformal coating. So before I can start soldering to it and fixing it, I do have to remove that conformal coating first. So let's do that with our conformal coating gel remover. So we like to use the chemicals from the company called MG Chemicals, and they sell a couple of different types of conformal coating remover. We do like to purchase both. One of them is a gel form and the other one is a liquid form. They both have their different applications, but for this job specifically, we're going to use the gel form conformal coating remover. It takes about 30 minutes for the chemical to start removing that conformal coating and loosening it up, so we'll reconvene then and start our cleaning process. So I'm just going to try and get the bulk of it off here with this Q-tip. And if you are trying to do this at home and you're using the conformal coating stripper remover, just be aware it's very corrosive, so you're not going to want to leave it on the circuit board or chips for very long. You could probably leave it overnight, although I wouldn't recommend it. But if you do any longer than that, it will actually start corroding and attacking the board, the chips, and so on. So I'm going to use isopropyl alcohol on a brush to kind of scrub some of it off screen, and we'll be right back. Okay, this is our chip after a more thorough cleaning with some isopropyl alcohol and a little bit of elbow grease. I am going to, however, notice we still have a decent amount of the conformal coating stuck in between some of the legs here. So I can try and literally one by one go through and physically remove it with my tweezers. It's going to be a little bit of a long process, but the reason you would want to do this is just to make it easier for the soldering. If I start soldering and there's still conformal coating on the board, it will make it harder for me to get good flow. That conformal coating will get in the way a little bit. So I'm just going to try and remove a little bit more of it. I could go with another round of conformal coating stripper, but sometimes it's more difficult to get in those little crevices. So this is as clean as it's going to get for now, and it's not perfect, but it doesn't technically need to be perfect. The bulk of the conformal coating has been removed, and I think this is going to be clean enough for us to be able to do a proper job. I'm going to add a pretty good layer of flux here on my pins. And now we're going to be able to start. Oh, you know what? I forgot to show you guys the fact that some of these pins are probably loose, like completely loose. I should have done this before the flux. So I'm going to melt the flux a little bit just so it's transparent. But what I wanted to do is a rake to see if any of the pins were going to bend and warp. And actually, no, none of them did. Okay, well, let's just solder up then. Sometimes some of these pins do completely disconnect from the board. I'm just going to drag that solder over. And then we'll go back over. That little excess, we're going to go ahead and desolder a little bit. And can we just clean that off? Yes, we can. All right, we're going to do the same process, a quick little rake. Oh, there we go. That very last pin just completely came off. So let me bend it back. But that does show we have some loose connections, and that's why our cluster was not able to always communicate, and when I put pressure, it probably just temporarily reformed that connection by pushing the pin towards the pad. So same thing, we're just going to drag the solder across and back. Just to clarify, usually we want to do the raking before we put the flux. I just forgot in this case. Okay, that side looks okay. Obviously, we're still going to touch it up because they are prone to failing. Okay, doesn't look like I removed enough. Let's go ahead and move on to our last side. Quick little rake. Let's double check. None of the pins are bent. Good. We'll add a little extra solder. And there's a lot of tight components here, so we want to be careful not to knock those off. Let's bring that blob back over to the other side where it'll be easier to desolder. There we go. Okay, I have not put everything back together. We're just going to power it on and see what we get. The important thing is that we get both of our screens to turn on. So let's check it out. And it's pulling 0.4, 0.39 amps. And look at that, both of our screens are turning on. Okay, so it looks like we have a successful repair. I still have a lot of flux residue everywhere, so I'm gonna do a final cleanup, and then what we're gonna wanna do next is actually coat it with conformal coating so that we can have a nice seal in case there's any moisture or dust, like that we don't get any shorts on those IC pins. Okay, our chip is now sealed, so we can put the unit back together. All right, I'm gonna zero out my needles, make sure that they land where they need to. Okay, that one looks pretty good. This one's a little low. There we go. And before I put the full front cover, let me do one last test. Let's move some of the gauges to the wrong spots. Power cycle it a couple times. Just want to make sure everything zeroes out where it needs to, and it looks like it is. So we'll go ahead and put it fully back together, and then we'll do our final live test in the vehicle. Let's see what we get. Okay, everything is turning on. Both of my screens are turning on. I can't turn the vehicle on because I don't have the instrument cluster's VIN number paired with the vehicle itself, but at least we're seeing our needles are adjusting a little bit. So that does confirm everything is now reading. Both of my screens are there. Okay, and that does confirm to me that we have a successful repair. If you have a defective instrument cluster for a Land Rover LR3 vehicle and you want to send it in for us to fix, we do offer flat rate services which come with a 1-year warranty. Those are available on our website, which I will link in the video description down below. If you found the video helpful or useful, leave us a like, subscribe for more content, and thank you for watching.